today we're gonna be doing a reading vlog of these two books. Very exciting, so get excited about that. If you like this series and you want to see my reaction, keep on watching. So it's almost noon and I'm starving, so I'm gonna go get some lunch and then I'm gonna do some reading. I just wanted to update you guys because I'm doing a reading vlog, but I'm kind of in the middle of reading. I read this book already this week, Once Upon a Broken Heart. Sorry if you can see my straw down here, it's kind of in the frame. I wanted to show you guys some of the quotes that I annotated in this book because I was underlining a lot. I don't really want to like annotate too much in books, but if I see a line that I really like, I just kind of underline it with pen. The first thing I annotated in here is on page 61, and it says, "It was tremendously hard to fully fall out of love with someone when you had no one else to love instead." I really loved that quote because I have trouble forgetting about people until I find someone new to think about. And recently I've been thinking about this because sometimes I think about people from like years ago. It's super relatable, just that feeling of like you just can't get this person out of your head because there's no one exciting in your life currently. So you just think about like the past and romanticize someone from like 2 years ago. It's like, it's tough. Basically, I really liked it. I rated this book 4 stars because it was really captivating and engaging, and I read really fast. I couldn't tell from the beginning of this book who the love interest was. Like I really was not convinced. Usually I feel like I can tell immediately who a love interest is in a book, but with this book, I was like doubting it over and over again. And now that I'm on the second book, I think it's pretty obvious. You know, and honestly, to be honest, there's foreshadowing in this book. In like one of the very first scenes, they talk about a scent, and I was like, They talk about how she walks into the church, and the church of the character Jax is supposed to smell like your worst heartbreak, and it doesn't smell like Luke, her current heartbreak. It smells like apples. I was like, I wonder if he smells like apples. So I feel like that's kind of foreshadowing for this book. The next quote is on page 240. "She wanted to just forget him, to close her eyes and have it all go away. But there were reasons powerful emotions didn't vanish in a blink. Reasons why a person had to become stronger than her feelings to let them go." The characters were captivating, the storyline was captivating, and honestly, for fantasy, it wasn't that hard to get into because sometimes with fantasy, there's like that first chunk where you have no idea what is going on and you're kind of learning like the world and all of the vocabulary within the book. But this was relatively easy to get into, and I was concerned because I haven't read the Caraval series or the Caraval series, so I thought this would be very difficult to get into, but it wasn't. I like the fact that the characters are not like perfect people. Like for example, Jax, he makes some mistakes, and I feel like it makes him more interesting. I think it's really annoying when books make characters perfect. So that's all I'm going to talk about with this book. So now we're moving on to this book, and I will talk about it after my lunch because I ordered some food. I'm back with an update of reading The Ballad of Never After. So this morning I read like 60 pages and I got pretty far into it. Last night I read a bunch. I'm currently on page 263. So one of the things I really like about these books is the way that Stephanie Garber describes things, but some of the things that she says are so beautifully described. Like on page 9, she describes Jax and she said he moved as if the night should have been afraid of him. And to me, that just creates like such a strong visual. The next quote that I really love, "There was no clock in the carriage, but Evangeline could hear time slipping away. Or maybe time was friends with Jax and it was taunting her too." The thing that I really like about this book, and I think I really needed to read something like this, is because sometimes with like the normal adult romance novels or sometimes even YA romance novels, things can be so predictable and it's like you get kind of bored being like, oh, now they're falling in love. It's so obvious. But I think what I like about this book is that the characters are morally gray, and that creates like much more potential for different outcomes to happen. And I feel like because Jax is like a bad person, or fate or whatever, he's bad, like we really don't know if his intentions are ever good, and we can't really trust. And I think that makes it so much more interesting. I feel like after reading ACOTAR, I don't trust like the main love interest in the beginning of fantasy anymore. I still do think that Jax is the love interest in this, but I really just don't know. Their banter is really good and I like it a lot. Even though I'm like, should we like Jax? Should we not like Jax? Like, I just don't even know anymore. There's a really great quote that starts on 244. Just kind of reminded me of like taking ownership of your life and like living as the main character in your own story. It says, she felt as if she were in the center of 100 stories, love stories and tragedies and tales with endings lost to time. And suddenly her worries felt lost as well, swept away by the feeling that her life was one of those stories. It just had never occurred to Evangeline that these stories were bigger things, pieces of history currently being formed. Realizing that you are living in a moment in history and your life is a future story. It's really a story about stories, and I love stories. And I heard there's a cliffhanger at the end, so I'm kind of stressed about that, but I'm gonna have to wait until September to read the next book. Does Jax love her, or is he using her? Like, is he using his like smoldering attractive power just for like opening the arch? I just don't know. It's so convincing when he flirts with her, but then it's like, I feel like we're gonna lose total faith in him by the end of this book. But I think that in the end, he is a love interest, because in the very beginning of the first book, they mention that the church smells like apples and it's supposed to smell like your biggest heartbreak. But then again, like if it smells like heartbreak, then maybe she doesn't end up with him. Like, I don't know. I wrote down that Jax gives me Damon and Elena vibes. They're like morally gray and corrupt, but they have this like smoldering attraction to each other. That's all I have to say for now. I honestly might finish this like today or tomorrow. Okay, I'm on page 273, and this is kind of spoilery, but not really. I'm feeling like Jax is the archer. Okay, something about this book that's bothering me that I realized is that the main character, Evangeline, is like way too forgiving of Jax. Like, she says that she's never gonna trust him again, she doesn't like him, that he's evil or whatever. And then 5 seconds later, she's like, oh, but he came back for me, but he like bandaged my wounds and stuff. And it's like, well, the man has been lying to you and framed you for murder. I just got my brows done, so ignore the fact that my face is red, but I'm making some progress on my book. And I'm currently on page 341. This morning I finally finished reading The Ballad of Never After. So I just wanted to tell you my thoughts and wrap up this reading vlog. This book I ended up giving 4 stars because I really do like the story and it's easy to read and understand, but I will say that I feel like the middle of this book dragged a little bit for me, but then like the last 100 pages were so much more interesting and really engaging. Spoiler alert, if you've read the book, you know that there is a huge cliffhanger at the end of this. So at the end, Evangeline is dying and it says the end, and I really thought it was the end of the book and that we were just going to have to kind of like figure out what happened in the next book in September. But then you keep reading and the book is not over. There's like an entire page that says the end, and then the book just continues for like 15 more pages. And I think that that was symbolic of just showing like one of the many outcomes of stories, and like that was the end of a story within this universe and within like this reality. Like that was the end, but because there's so many outcomes to each story, like the actual book continued but the story ended. So like in one reality, that's how their story ended, and like she died and Jax was heartbroken, and also through her death we have have like one little chapter where we're not really in her perspective anymore. And it's really interesting because we finally see that Jax loves her and cares about her. And I honestly like was still doubting it to the very end, which was kind of confusing for me. Then we like re-enter her mind. We're basically seeing like almost like a Groundhog Day scenario where she goes back to a moment in the past and Jax is like trying to make sure that she doesn't get killed by chaos this time. But the thing is, they said that by bringing her back, it would have like a huge cost on Jax. And then Apollo comes back and is like alive and fine, and apparently the Archer's curse is broken, but then Apollo wipes all of her memories. She doesn't remember anything except for like her parents died, and she doesn't remember Apollo or Jax or anyone. And first of all, since when can Apollo wipe memories? Like, what's the deal with that? What even happened? The last 50 pages of this book was just like a whirlwind, and I really liked it. And I liked it a lot better than the first like 300 pages of this book. Not that I didn't enjoy the book, it's just like it got so much better by the end, which is why I gave it 4 stars. But I feel like I don't have any idea how they're gonna salvage this. Like, how is Evangeline's memories going to all come back? How is Jax going to save her from Apollo? Is Apollo cursed or something? Or is Apollo a bad guy now? Like, has he always been a bad guy? Did we just believe him for no reason? Like, I don't know. I'm very curious. Anyway, that was my thoughts on this book. There's a lot more that I could talk about, like the Valerie Arch being opened and all the Valors being alive and all of that. But honestly, I feel like they're going to explore all of that in the next book. And I'm just really curious to see what's happening, and also the fact that Chaos was Castor. It all happened so fast. There's almost like too much to dissect at the end of this book, but it's kind of good that the next book isn't out yet. I feel like I need a little bit of a break from fantasy. I really enjoyed this, and I definitely recommend this, like, to anyone who likes fantasy or romance. It was really refreshing in the way that it wasn't predictable at all, and highly recommend.